Hey everybody. Whoop. It's Monday. Welcome back here for this nice weekend that we had. Got some nice weather actually going on here in Michigan now, which is nice. Especially after the extended winter we seem to have had. Anyway, we're back. We got a lot of great stories here on Monday. Welcome to the show. Around the Nation, of course. Jeff Waldorf here with you. So we got a great show for you guys today. We're going to talk about Michelle Wolf. It appears to be, that conservatives continuously have a problem with people named Wolf. Starting out with Michael Wolf in the book Fire and Fury, of course. Now we got Michelle Wolf. What else is going to happen? Fascinating. We got conservative snowflakes that are absolutely melting. It's great. But we also have establishment snowflakes that are also melting alongside. So we're going to talk about that. Then we have, of course, serious news on the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and the supposed landmark settlement with Wells Fargo. I want to talk about that because that is just disastrous. We got Donald Trump sticking his foot in his mouth. We have the National Enquirer going on the attack against Michael Cohen. Ben Carson, of course, we've got an update, a little bit more information on what Ben Carson's plan to triple the rent on poor people, how many people that's going to affect and how. So more information on that. And then we'll end the story with some good news about weed. I think you'll enjoy that story. All right. First, now I am out of order in my notes. So let's, well, first of all, how is everybody? Hopefully everybody had an amazing weekend. Mine was good. Didn't do a whole lot. Had some back issues, so I kind of relaxed and decided not to do a lot of yard work. So, yeah, got a little lazy this weekend, but oh well, not much you can do about it. I am feeling quite a bit better, so that's good. I've been playing through, doing the second playthrough of Nier Automata. That's a pretty good game. Apparently you have to replay it or go through it several times to get the different endings. So I'm doing like my second playthrough, and they have you change your character. So you're playing it from another character's perspective. So that's interesting. That should be, so far it's actually proven to be very interesting, and I cannot wait till I get to the completely fucked up version, which is when you get into the third playthrough. Oh, that's going to be interesting. So I can't wait for that. I just have to get through it. So anyway, that was my weekend. Of course, Infinity War, I have not seen that, so no spoilers, please. I haven't seen that because I haven't seen Black Panther. And the reason, of course, I haven't seen any of those movies is because I haven't had the time for it. So, like, I got to see Black Panther, but then I got to wait for it to come out on Blu-ray or DVD or whatever the hell streaming. And that's going to be a while. And so I think it's kind of like a precondition to watch Black Panther first and then go to Infinity War. So I'm going to be avoiding spoilers for quite some time. But look, I'm a dork, so I kind of know how it ends in a way. So, but nonetheless, no spoilers. I want to see it first. However, I'm going to see it. So whether or not I decide to, because here's the thing, like when you're married, you got to take your wife to the movies. Like it doesn't matter. You got to take your girl. You go out to a movie, you can't go by yourself, and like you can't take other people. So, you know what I mean? So it's one of those things where it's like I have a wife that works weekends, basically just about every single weekend. She's working. And it's the only time that I have off, so it's really difficult for me to go and actually do things on the weekend, like watch movies. So, that's rough. At least when it comes to being able to watch movies. But nonetheless, that's why I haven't seen it. So no spoilers, guys. Don't ruin it for me. All right. Anyway, cue somebody in the comments ruining it. Anyway, so let's get into the stories here. Now, before I get into the story, I want to remind everybody, please give us a like and a share. That really helps with getting the show out there. And also, I want to encourage everybody to use Super Chat. That, of course, goes to helping the show as we suffer through the continued adpocalypse and the decimation of the search and discovery. So one of the reasons that the channel is not doing nearly as well as it used to is because we're not in the search and discovery feeds. So that's the problem. And then, of course, a lot of the videos don't get out to the most of the subscribers. So there's lack of notifications and things like that. So yeah, we've been kind of destroyed. So if you want to help us out, you can go to the Super Chat. Do a Super Chat. I'll read them during the breaks, or I should say after the breaks, if we take them, or else I'll find another time to do it during the show. Or you can become a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. So, and then YouTube is also going to be rolling out something later on that is another way to support channels. So that's interesting, and I'll let you guys know when that gets turned on. All right. Anyway, so let's get into the stories. Huh? Okay. Here we go. This is a great story. All right. Washington insiders and so-called journalists are having a little bit of a meltdown after a comedian decided to dare make some jokes against people in power. Now, Saturday night marked the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Now, that dinner, of course, is basically where people in power and members of the media get together and they basically kiss each other's ass. So, understand, I got no love for the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Now, of course, you can't have a dinner without a good roast. And look, during the Obama years, for example, there were some excellent roasts from some excellent comics. You also had some excellent roasts during the Bush administration as well. So this year, it fell to Michelle Wolf, who decided that she was not going to pull any punches, or she was definitely not going to go easy on the Trump administration. In fact, I've got a video here of her roasting Sarah Huckabee Sanders. And look, this is awesome. So take a look.
With Sarah's presence tonight, I have to say I'm a little starstruck. I love you as Aunt Lydia on The Handmaid's Tale. Mike Pence, if you haven't seen it, you would love it. Every time Sarah steps up to the podium, I get excited because I'm not really sure what we're going to get. You know, a press briefing, a bunch of lies, or divided into softball teams. It's shirts and skins, and this time don't be such a little bitch, Jim Acosta. I actually really like Sarah. I think she's very resourceful. Like, she burns facts, and then she uses that ash to create a perfect smoky eye. Like, maybe she's born with it. Maybe it's lies. It's probably lies. And I'm never really sure what to call Sarah Huckabee Sanders. You know, is it Sarah Sanders? Is it Sarah Huckabee Sanders? Is it Cousin Huckabee? Is it Auntie Huckabee Sanders? Like, what's Uncle Tom but for white women who disappoint other white women? Oh, I know, Aunt Coulter.
All right, so look, there were some pretty good jabs in there. Now, there's a lot of controversy over the smoky eye. Dude, it's his makeup. But anyway, so look, obviously, some of those jokes were over the line about Sarah Huckabee Sanders, not to mention apparently the jokes about abortion and the fact that she said the word pussy. Oh my God, I just said it. Oh my God. No. Oh, here we go. I'm going to get censored, guys. That's what's going to happen. I said the word. I said the word. Oh, man. Look, the Washington freakout is epic. Now, first, let me go to some examples of this, right? Now, Sean Spicer decided to poke his head out of the bushes long enough to call Wolf's routine, quote, a disgrace on Twitter. Lovely. You also have National Security Advisor John Bolton, who took time out of his busy weekend of planning an attack on Iran and while playing Call of Duty, because of course, to go on Fox News Sunday to call this bit reprehensible. Oh, this is such a terrible thing. Chris Christie said Wolf had unfairly attacked Sarah Huckabee Sanders on her physical appearance. Now, to be fair, Chris Christie probably has a little bit of experience with that. I know, out of bounds. I denounce and reject myself for that absolutely terrible, unfair joke against Chris Christie's physical appearance. Now, you also had Drudge. Yes, Drudge. Their banner headline says, Smut stand-up shocks DC. Oh my God, Smut. It's so terrible. Look at this terrible stuff that she was saying. Now, Trump also weighed in from Michigan, since he was too much of a wuss to actually show up to the White House Correspondents' dinners. Instead, he needed to be surrounded by adoring fans chanting his name because, look, the guy can't stand being made fun of in person. He said, this was on Twitter, while Washington, Michigan was a big success, Washington, D.C. just didn't work. Well, that's interesting. Everyone is talking about the fact that the White House Correspondents' Dinner was a very big, boring bust. The so-called comedian really bombed. Fox's Greg Gutfeld should host next year. And for some reason, he tags in Pete Hegseth from Fox and Friends. Again, this is the guy he lets calls in, he lets this guy call in from Fox News. Amazing, right? Now, oh yes, let's have Greg Gutfeld. I'm sure that would work out greatly, considering that he's actually not funny. You know who else isn't funny? Dennis Miller. Now, Dennis Miller decided to weigh in as well. He said, quote, what a horrid human being Michelle Wolf is. I'm going to read up on her over the next couple of days, and I will have a few brutally mean jokes about her by Wednesday. That's a long time to wait for a joke. I mean, you're on Twitter, you could just write up a joke right there. But of course, I'm sure he's so busy with his amazing stand-up career and his endless job opportunities to be able to take time to do that, right? Right. Now, it's not just right-wing snowflakes that are melting. Of course, you have people from the left that are attacking her as well. You have Maggie Haberman, the New York Times, saying, quote, that press secretary sat and absorbed intense criticism of her physical appearance. Where was that? Again, there's the reference to smoky eye. But again, that's makeup. That's not an attack on her physical appearance. Wearing makeup. A lot of people wear makeup. But again, apparently that's a horrific, brutal criticism of her physical appearance. Oh my God. Her job performance, and so forth, instead of walking out on national television, was impressive. I actually thought the makeup joke was pretty good. She burns facts and uses the ashes as makeup. That's brilliant. That's clever. No, look, that's not a physical attack. What it is, or a personal attack on her appearance, I should say, that's calling her out as basically a liar. She takes facts and she gets rid of them. She burns them up. Maybe she's born with it. Maybe it's lies. It's lies. It's lies. You know why? Because she's a liar, and she lies all the time, and she does it with a straight face. Tell me that's not true. Tell me that's not true, and tell it to me with a straight face. I guarantee you can't do it. She's such an obvious liar. But there's more. There's more reactions. Politico's Jake Sherman said that it went too far. Just too far. It's too far. It's so mean-spirited. It's supposed to be a lighthearted affair, but you're making it so mean. Why are you going to be so mean to people in power? Oh, my God. This media frustrates me, man. Finally, you've got New York Times' Peter Baker. He said, I would vote to leave the comedy acts to comedy shows and stick to journalism at journalism dinners. Well, to be fair, Peter, you would have to do journalism first. I think in this context, in the context of media relation with Washington, that a comedy act is perfectly appropriate. Because right now, the media, the mainstream media, the corporate media is nothing more than a joke, and a bad one at that. I mean, what you have is nonstop Stormy Daniels and Russia. And you also have media outlets that refused to hold the president accountable and to hold Republicans and Democrats accountable for the shitty things that they pass. I mean, they call it great bipartisanship when two sides vote together to fuck over the American people, to screw them out of something. Oh, great bipartisanship. No, it's not. Bipartisan pretty much means both sides have gotten together to help their wealthy donors and to screw over regular Americans. So the whole bipartisan thing is just bullshit. They don't talk about super important issues. They don't talk about climate change nearly enough. They don't talk about stagnant wages or poverty in America. Not nearly enough. They don't talk about the bombing of Yemen that we're still doing right now. All the drone strikes that we're doing. How the increasing casualties that we have from those drone strikes are made up, they're majority made up of civilians. Civilians are the ones that are being bombed for the most part in these drone strikes. But no, we're not talking about that. We're not talking about Flint still not having drinkable water. So that's why the media is a joke. Now, there's one more last thing, right? So White House Correspondents Association President Margaret Tlaib told the Associated Press after the blow up, after all the conservative butthurt and the liberal tears, right? Supposed liberal tears, anyway. They went on a full-throated apology to her for this. She said, quote, last night's program was meant to offer a unifying message about our common commitment to a vigorous and free press while honoring civility, great reporting, and scholarship winners, not to divide people. She then went on to tell Politico, my goal in putting together last night's dinner was to unify the room and the country around journalism and the First Amendment, which, look, those are both things that I wholeheartedly support. And I shared what I believe about those subjects in my own remarks. The association by tradition does not preview or censor the entertainer's remarks. Some of them made me uncomfortable and did not embody the spirit of the night, and that is protected by the First Amendment. I appreciated Sarah Sanders for joining us at the head table and her grace through the program. You know what that whole thing means? Both of those statements are essentially her saying, we're so sorry. But we don't actually vet the entertainers. We didn't know she was going to say those terrible, terrible things about Sarah Huckabee Sanders. And please, just don't remove our access. That's the thing that's most important to us, is access to the politicians. We don't care how slimy they are. We don't care how often that they lie. We don't care how much they attack the media. We want our access. We need our access. Please don't remove it. And that's the biggest problem here that I have with cable news. Access, right? How they just line up in order to have that access. Look, that's why she's being criticized. Michelle Wolf is. That's why also Stephen Colbert was criticized when he roasted the Bush administration. And that was an epic-ass roast. But look, again, all they want is access for the politicians. So that's why they don't like you to rock the boat. It's funny because old media thinks that, no, if we get these politicians in here to say their talking points, and then we bring in a Democrat to say their talking points, and then it's, well, I mean, Democrats say this, Republicans say that. You decide. We're just giving you both points of views. Look at how neutral we are. Well, they think that's going to bring them ratings. But, see, they've always felt that way. Now it's actually getting worse under Trump. And now the media is even getting more deferential to people under Trump because now the administration is full of snowflakes who basically complain, who melt every time somebody makes a joke. Now there's some hypocrisy in that, of course, because the Trump administration, look, for Trump himself, for example, he mocked Megyn Kelly. Now, I have no love for Megyn Kelly, right? But nonetheless, here's Trump saying, oh, you've got blood. She's got blood coming out of her eyes or wherever. And look, he also made fun of a disabled reporter, or look, all the other myriad of shots that Trump and members of the administration have made against the media. It's hypocritical to sit there and defend them when they say horrific things about everybody else. But when a comedian says some things that, are a little racy or whatever, little inappropriate against the administration as a joke, well, I mean, can't have that. It's ridiculous, right? I think at this point, in my opinion, the White House Correspondents' Dinners deserves to die. And look, the reason, and I was reading Axios about this, Mike Allen, which look, I normally agree with, but in this case, he's like, well, I mean, they shouldn't have done that because you just handed the administration a gigantic win, because now all we're going to do is sit there and have a debate on whether or not they're going to kill the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Kill it already. And here's why, right? All the White House Correspondents' Dinner ever was is a place where the media and politicians can sit there and schmooze with each other. That's all it is, where they kiss each other's ass. And, they talk about access. And that's it. It's ridiculous, right? So, no, the White House Correspondents' Dinner does deserve to die. Not because of what Wolf had actually said, but perhaps maybe in spite of it. Okay. All right. So let's go to our next story. Let's have some fun. You goddamn right I'm going to be disrespectful towards the president. Fuck him. You happy? All right. Now on Friday, let me say the word right. Now on Friday, President Trump mocked the Paralympics during a White House photo op with the Olympic team. Now during the speech, he decided he was going to make an off-the-cuff remark about how tough it is to actually watch the Paralympics. Let's take a look at that video and we'll break it down.
Do we have any quitters here? Raise your hand, please. All right, because I was going to say, get the hell out of here. No quitters in this group, huh? I had a feeling that was true. You overcame setbacks, you powered through obstacles. And I will tell you this, because of your hard work and your sacrifice, you were given the greatest honor in sports to represent the United States as an Olympic athlete. That is really an honor. And it's you have to be so proud, and your families. So today, on behalf of the United States, I want to thank every Olympian and Paralympian. And that was just incredible. And what happened with the Paralympics was so incredible and so inspiring to me. And I watched. It's a little tough to watch too much, but I watched as much as I could. It was really fantastic, and I want to thank you.
All right, so there you can tell when he's reading his prepared remarks, right? The stuff that somebody else wrote for him, and when he's actually saying the things that he wants to say. Like, is there any quitters? I tell you to get the hell out. I tell you to get the hell out. Now, of course, he's messing around. He's bullshitting, of course, because that's kind of what he does. It's the same when he said, well, I mean, I watched the Paralympics. It's really hard for me to do sometimes, to watch too much of it. But what I watched, it was good. It was a little tough, though. A little tough. So here's what we need to do. We actually need to reset the counter of days since Trump made giant ass of himself back to 0. Don't say that. My God, he's an idiot. Oddly enough, though, he betrays how he feels. Like, yeah, of course. Like, I'm not going to watch too much of it because I'd rather watch other things, right? Like, what, Fox and Friends? Likely. Morning Joe, because I know he secretly loves watching Morning Joe. He secretly loves watching CNN. It's like, it's the people who hate watch things. Like, I got people who hate watch the show. Thank you, by the way. You help our viewership. Even if half of you are the ones that are hate watching, great, you're helping. Thank you, appreciate it. But look, even if he hate watches, you know he that's what he spends a lot of his time doing. And in fact, he's got executive time in the morning where all he does is sit around, eat cheeseburgers, watch TV, and call his friends to bitch about everybody else. And that normally eats into his time, or should have eaten, or actually does eat into his time, where he actually could be doing president stuff. But, look, Trump's probably the laziest president we have ever had. But anyway, now, look, back to what he was saying about the Paralympics, right? Oh, it's so tough to watch. It's tough to watch. Well, what's so tough about it? I mean, look, these are extraordinary people overcoming extraordinary odds to compete, to see who's better. Now, look, I'm proud of these people and what they do. These athletes are way more active and in better shape than I am. And look, I don't hold myself out as a paragon of being in shape. I am completely out of shape. Well, to be fair, I am in a shape. Round is a shape. So, hey, look at that. Now, look, they're also in way better shape than Donald Trump, so he's got no grounds to speak on any of that stuff. But look, he's an idiot, and he blurts out ridiculous, dumb things whenever he decides to go off script. And that's exactly what's happened. Now, the Paralympics had a response, and they responded on Twitter with their official Twitter account. They said record numbers around the world are not finding Paralympics tough to watch. Billions of viewers now take in the Paralympics in hundreds of countries around the world. We hope the U.S. president continues to watch and be inspired by the Paralympics. Well, look, sorry to say, but I wouldn't put too much money on that one. Just saying. Okay. Fun times. All right. So let's get into one more story here about related to President Trump, and then we'll move on. All right. Oh boy. In another sign that Michael Cohen is likely to flip on President Trump, you have a prominent tabloid that is close to the president has decided to turn on the embattled lawyer. Now, this is according to an article in HuffPost. The National Enquirer recently published a 3-page spread listing the numerous legal issues currently plaguing Michael Cohen. Now, they wrote, Cohen is under the spotlight as scandals swirl around his boss and some are questioning Cohen's role, alleging blackmail, threats, hush money payoffs, and even collusion with Russia. The president is in the hot seat because of his lawyer. Well, no, wait a minute. So, understand what they're doing, right? The president's in the hot seat all because of Michael Cohen. I can't believe what Michael Cohen did. But wait. But why would... What? I don't get it. Basically, I think they're saying that no, it was Michael Cohen that did all of these things, but it has absolutely nothing to do with Donald Trump. See, Donald Trump was blissfully unaware of everything that he is alleged to have done or that Michael Cohen is alleged to have done on behalf of Donald Trump. How dare you blame Donald Trump? It's all Michael Cohen's fault. Well, to be fair, they are tabloids. They are used to printing outrageously untrue things. So, now why do I think this is evidence of Cohen flipping on Trump? Or potentially flipping on Trump? Well, for that I go to back to HuffPost, and they explain the National Enquirer is owned by American Media Inc. That's AMI. It's a company chaired by Trump friend David Pecker. I know. I'm a child. Now, the company's 4-member board also includes a former chief financial officer of Trump's casino business. Oh, that's interesting how he's been able to stay employed. Anyway, so look, there are some Trump connections. Obviously, we know that the National Enquirer has been very, very pro-Trump, mainly because of Pecker, as well as other Trump connections. Now, you would think that these people would have some inside information, right? Or at least might understand Donald Trump's thinking and his mood. So that kind of shows you that the administration is really starting to write off Michael Cohen. Now, why would they write off Michael Cohen? Well, because they believe that Cohen is probably going to talk, or is already talking. Now, why would that be a problem? Unless you have something to hide. And that's the question. Now, it is very obvious when you look at this that Trump is actually putting some distance between himself and Cohen. Now, let me give you an example. So, if anybody remembers that rambling 30-minute interview that President Trump recently had with Fox and Friends, which, by the way, somebody did a video, I think it was with Mad World, but the slowed down version of Mad World, and put that song to the video. Oh, it's so good. It's so good. I love it when people do stuff like that. Just to show how, like, the Fox and Friends host did not want to be there for that interview. It was awesome. Well, anyway, during that train wreck, Trump had said, quote, "Michael is a businessman. He's got a business." Well, yeah, that would make him a businessman. He also practices law. Right? And he said prosecutors are looking at something having to do with his business. I have nothing to do with his business. Okay. So why bringing that up? That's interesting. No, business. I mean, he's got business, but I've got nothing to do with his business. Then why are you mentioning that you have nothing to do with his business? Now they should look and see whether or not you've had anything to do with Michael Cohen's business. Because you keep saying things. Like, Trump can't shut up. He can't shut up. He cannot stop, like, giving out leads for people to investigate. I mean, all you have to do is just listen to him talk about the things that they shouldn't look into to get an idea of what you probably should look into. Just saying. Again, now, they are looking into Michael Cohen. And look, that is something that those investigators will eventually find the truth on. Whether or not Trump had any business inside of, or I guess business in Michael Cohen's business, or any connections to the business, or whatever, or anything to do with the payments, for example, to not only Stormy Daniels, but now Karen McDougal. So that's going to be very interesting when that happens. Again, the FBI now has the records, and that could be a problem with National Enquirer's parent company, AMI, who is now also being investigated. In fact, among the records seized by the FBI were documents related to another $150,000 payment, $150,000 payment made to Karen McDougal, as I mentioned before. Now, what they did is they bought her rights to her story. And her story is that she had an affair with Donald Trump. Well, get online, girl. Apparently, a lot of people have had affairs with Donald Trump. And a lot of people ended up getting paid off. So, now, of course, the reason that we didn't hear about these is because here you have AMI, which goes and buys these stories. I think it's regular for tabloids to do, to go in and, oh, no, hey, you've got a story, you've got a lead for us, great, we'll buy it. But in the case of anything with Donald Trump, they buy it and then they axe the story. It's called catch and kill. That's a real technique that they use. Now, McDougal, and the reason that we're actually hearing about that alleged $150,000 is that she sued to get out of that contract. So, and guess what? She won. She won the lawsuit, the settlement, and she is no longer in that contract. So now she's telling her story. Add that to Stormy Daniels, and well, all of this has Mr. Pecker and President Trump both incredibly worried. And finally, add on to that the possibility that Michael Cohen, who is facing some very serious charges, but hasn't been indicted on them yet, and I'm not sure if he will be. That speaks, of course, to any sort of evidence that they may or may not have. But if they have some, oh boy, it's going to get very, very interesting. Fun. All right. Continue. And please, everybody, like and share if you haven't already. And please consider using the super chat so I can read some comments later. Okay. That said, let's go to something serious. Let's talk about how the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is now being used as an instrument to screw you over. Lovely. Okay. Did I change that yet? No, I did not. Now, recently acting CFPB director Mick Mulvaney has been facing criticism for his lax enforcement of predatory lenders and misbehaving banks. Now, critics want to point out, and they love to point out, the recent billion-dollar settlement with Wells Fargo as proof that he's doing his best with enforcement, and that, hey, man, look, you libtards need to just lay off, man. Mick Mulvaney's doing a fantastic job. He's really taking those bankers to task. To which I say, it's ridiculous. And look, here's why. Now, while the Wells Fargo settlement was pretty big in relation to other settlements, like nobody has paid that much before, I think I've talked about before the fact that our enforcement and the penalties and the fines for some of these financial institutions are woefully out of date. And look, when you realize that Wells Fargo pulls in billions of dollars in profit every year, every quarter, billions of dollars in profit, that $1 billion fine doesn't seem like a whole lot. So, in reality, this massive fine is nothing more than a slap on the wrist, right? Now, secondly, and far more important, or at least when it comes to the focus of the story, is that the settlement is also full of loopholes. And this is, of course, thanks to Mick Mulvaney. Now, The Intercept explains that according to the language in the settlement agreement, in order for homeowners and auto loan customers to receive restitution, these are people that, of course, did get screwed over by Wells Fargo, and in some cases, people with auto loans ended up getting double insured, which in some of those cases, they ended up losing their car. They ended up having it repossessed because they couldn't afford the double insurance on it that was tacked on there. Now, these people who deserved this restitution for getting screwed over would have to identify an economic or other cognizable harm based mainly on a specific violation of federal law, under a standard created and judged by none other than Wells Fargo. So wait, Wells Fargo screwed people over, got caught with their hand in the cookie jar, got punished because they found overwhelming evidence that they screwed people over, and the CFPB says, well, great, we caught you. So now we're going to fine you $1 billion. But we're only going to make you give restitution to people who go through this arduous paperwork process. And we're going to let Wells Fargo judge who gets it. So, that is absurd. Now, here's the thing, right? Now, they continue. While the CFPB does get to audit the remediation plans, there's no mechanism for forcing the bank to change those plans outside of going to a court and claiming non-compliance with the settlement. So that court case would likely last for years. And with that army of corporate lawyers that they have, it is very possible that people screwed over would not be able to be able to get justice. Now, not only that, but under Mulvaney, do you think that that's actually ever going to happen? No, there's not a chance. Not a chance. Now, I have a quote here from a bankruptcy attorney, Omax Gardner, who says, how many consumers do you think will be able to complete and document the claim forms that Wells Fargo would be able to engineer? Using, of course, their extensive corporate lawyers and all of their experience to be able to draft these documents. Now, Gardner continues, by estimating that about 1%, at best, 1% of people that were screwed over by the company would actually be able to fill out these paperworks and possibly get restitution that they were owed. And this is after a company basically stole from them. No, this is a scam. This is a scam. In fact, this kind of agreement has never, ever been seen before. So, look, in fact, normally before Mulvaney took over, penalties were a bit more fair. In fact, I have an example of that. That's the 2014 settlement with U.S. Bank. Now, in that, the bank was fined $47.9 million for installing something called add-on products to credit card customer accounts without authorization and often without even providing the service. Now, in that instance, U.S. Bank had to pay customers the full amount of the add-on products for the entire time that they had them, along with all fees that shouldn't have been imposed and any finance charges. That amount had to be mailed directly to the borrower or credited to their account with a direct explanation of how the restitution was calculated. The borrower didn't have to do anything to get repaid. They didn't have to fill out any forms. They did that automatically. Now, the CFPB could have objected to the U.S. Bank's remediation plan without having to go back to court. So that is how it used to work. But now, under Mulvaney, the Wells Fargo settlement, that is way, way different terms. Now, what it does is that it will collect $1 billion from the bank, $500 million of which is satisfied by a parallel settlement with the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency. And for consumers to see any money from this, they would have to prove that they were actually harmed, rather than Wells Fargo having the burden of determining who was illegally charged and face penalties for noncompliance. Now, this puts the victims in position of having to act as their own lawyer or private investigator that tracks down the precise violation of law and affixes an explicit dollar amount. And of course, the person that is, or the company that is the ultimate arbiter is Wells Fargo. Putting the bank in charge of this is complete madness. But that's unfortunately what you get when you put somebody who gets paid by the banks in charge of regulating the banks. You want to talk about the swamp? This is a great example of the swamp. This is the corruption. And Mulvaney is one of the most corrupt swamp monsters we have. I mean, look, recently Mulvaney was caught telling banks, hey man, if you want me to listen to you, then you're going to have to bribe me more. You're going to have to send more campaign contributions our way. Congress's way. That's the only way we're going to do your policies. I mean, I agree with all your policies, but I want my share of the money. So pay up. That's what's going on here. And that is the corruption. And we have to, as the American people, root out that corruption and end the influence of money in politics. Because that's how you get people like Mulvaney in these positions anyway. That's how you get our sham elections. That's how you get a lot of the evils that are facing us in today. It's because of the money. We've got to get it out of politics and restore control to the people. Okay. All right. Got a couple more stories for you here. But first, I do have a super chat to read. Ex-Radical Mind says, non-gold-backed currency is destroying this country. We need to reinstate the gold standard. I don't necessarily agree with that. I'm not sure how it's destroying the country, and I'm not sure how gold standard would be that much better, because that is a fixed amount of currency, of course. And under our current laws, or the current way that the country is structured, what's to prevent all that from going to the top? Again, we already have a gigantic concentration of wealth at the top. What's going to prevent that from making it worse? And I have a feeling that somehow it will make it worse. But anyway, thanks for weighing in. I will disagree with you on this, but thank you for donating anyway. Okay. Now, let's move on here. Let's go to Ben Carson. So we now have more information about the plan by HUD to raise rent on the poorest Americans. I recently reported on this, where Ben Carson, of course, wanted to increase the rents, the amount of rent that people who are incredibly poor have to pay. Now, according to an analysis of HUD data by the Center for Budget on Budget and Policy Priorities, the proposal by Housing and Urban Development Secretary Ben Carson to at least triple the minimum rent that the poorest Americans pay for federally subsidized housing would put nearly 1 million children at risk of homelessness. Oh, okay, so let's just go and do this policy, triple the rent for poor people, and increase homelessness. Well, that sounds great. Now, the Washington Post explains that under current rules, families that receive housing subsidies typically pay about 30% of their income for rent. Now, public housing agencies can instead charge a minimum rent of up to $50 per month. Oh, interesting. Now, to a lot of people, of course, that might not seem like a whole lot for rent. Like, oh, I pay $500, or I pay $1,000, or I pay $2,000 for a closet and I live in New York. Help me. I'm in trouble. But look, when it comes to the poorest of the poor, $150 is actually quite a bit. People forget that there are a lot of people struggling to make ends meet. And a lot of the people that are going to be hurt by this is single mothers. Now, in fact, the minimum rent increase would affect about 15% of the 4.7 million households receiving federal housing subsidies. That's according to HUD officials. Now, that's still a lot of people who depend on this, right? So what does this group look like? Well, the typical household affected by the minimum rent increase would be a single mother of two earning a median income of, and you'll be shocked at this number, $2,400 a year. A year! $2,400. There are people that make that little in America. That's $200 a month. Now think about that, right? So those are the people that pay $50 in rent per month. Yes, there are millions of people, or I should say thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people, to be more accurate, that end up paying this amount of money because they make so little. Now, if you get $200 a month and you got to pay $150, well, it doesn't leave much left for anything else. I mean, yes, sure, a lot of these people also get other welfare programs, for example, food stamps, right? But as Eminem always likes to point out, those goddamn food stamps don't buy diapers. They also don't buy toilet paper. They also don't buy soap, deodorant, feminine products, which for, women, of course, are essential. And all those other little things that a lot of people don't really like to talk about, but are obvious expenses that for somebody who's got $50 are not easy to be able to afford. Now, in total, about 460,000 households headed by single mothers would be impacted by these changes. Now, there's another 200,000 households headed by a childless adult, many whom were previously homeless. They would also end up being impacted. So, but it's not just the most vulnerable that would see an increase in their rent. No, these HUD rules would actually affect others as well. HuffPost notes that in addition to tripling the minimum rent for the poorest Americans receiving housing assistance, the initiative unveiled last Wednesday by Carson would raise the rent for other tenants in subsidized housing to 35% of gross income from the current standard of 30% of adjusted income. So it may not sound like much, but that 5%, that is a difference between being able to afford another bill and not being able to afford another bill. An electric bill. For a lot of households, I think internet is sort of a requirement because it allows you to job search. A lot of jobs, of course, only take online applications. Or schooling, of course. A lot of people have to do online. That 5% could also mean gas money to be able to go to work or to be able to go out and find jobs or to use public transportation, which is not free in a lot of areas. Just think of all these different little things that 5% could cover that now will end up going to paying for the rent. And this, of course, is at a time where housing prices continue to rise, rents continue to rise. Yet, at the same time, wages are fairly stagnant, and you have a system where a majority of the wealth ends up flowing to the top. And what do we do when that happens? We end up cutting help for the most needy. As if our homelessness problem, as if our poverty problem in America isn't bad enough. No, let's go and make it worse. But that's exactly what Ben Carson is doing. And look, this isn't a surprise. I mean, look, we warned you, we told you that this was going to happen. Why? It's because they don't care. They don't care. They never cared. Again, they give giant tax cuts to the rich. And then they use that, and you're seeing it now. And we told you it was going to happen. They're going to use that to say, oh my God, look at that. We don't have the money to be able to sustain these programs anymore. We're going to have to cut your Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. We're going to have to cut your food stamps. We're going to cut your housing assistance. We're going to cut Medicaid. We're going to have to cut all of this stuff. So now that we can afford the what? The tax cuts for the rich. And they want to go through and give another round of gigantic tax cuts for the rich. We told you this was going to happen. We knew this was going to happen. Now, ironically, this will probably down the line hurt some Trump supporters. There are some exceptions in there in this proposal, of course, where people who over 65 on Social Security don't have to pay the increase for about 6 years. But then in 6 years, they're fucking SOL. Now, those same people, they're on, 65 or older. They're on Medicaid, food stamps, Social Security. They get Section 8 vouchers because they don't make a lot of money. They will end up paying more. Also, we can afford more tax cuts for the rich. Ridiculous. Now, are some of those people Trump supporters? Of course they are. Now, I think the majority, however, of Trump supporters will likely say, no, go ahead and cut this stuff. Doesn't affect me because I'm rich or I'm doing really, really well, which, look, people who voted for Trump skewed more wealthy than people who voted for Hillary Clinton. Let's be fair about that. But there are definitely some Trump supporters who are on these social welfare programs that are going to be hurt. So, but some of those people are even like, well, no, I deserve my welfare. The people's welfare that I wanted to cut is the black people, because that's where I think the majority of welfare goes, which is not exactly true. So they're going to be okay with cutting some of the benefits until they realize, oh no, you just cut my benefits. That whole thing just shows you the kind of people that these voters actually are. And it also shows you what kind of person Ben Carson is. I mean, this is a guy who grew up with a single mother. And now he's doing everything he can to hurt single mothers. But, hey, this is what, I guess this is what some people do when they become successful, when they become a Republican politician, is that they love to kick the ladder out from behind them. Okay. One more story here. We're going to go from disaster to good news. All right. So there's some good news on the front of incarceration and drug policy. Now, on Friday, the city of Seattle had filed a motion asking the Seattle Municipal Court to vacate hundreds of marijuana possession convictions going back to a period of 30 years. Holy hell. So that is a lot of time, right? Now, City Attorney Pete Holmes had released a statement on this. He said, as we see marijuana sold in retail storefronts today, people who simply had a joint in their pocket a decade ago still have a red mark on their records. It's long past time we remedied the drug policies of yesteryear, and this is one small step to right the injustices of a drug war that has primarily targeted people of color. I'm hopeful that the court will choose to clear these charges. And considering how it's Seattle, it is very likely. Now, these charges, of course, as Holmes alluded to, do affect people of color far more than they affect white people. So what that means is that if you're an African American and you happen to have marijuana or whatever, you're more likely to be arrested for possession, despite the fact that black people and white people tend to do drugs at essentially the same rate. You have a system with things like, for example, what they had was stop and frisk when that was going on in New York, where they would they would single out the minorities for frisking. Oh, no, you look suspicious because you're black or brown. You probably have drugs on you. So we're going to check. Oh, look at that. You do have drugs on you. We were right. So that, of course, justifies more racial profiling. When, again, it's been shown in studies that African Americans, Latinos, and white people, we all do drugs at about the same rate. So it's not a gigantic problem with just one community, as I guess popular culture and of course racist policing methods tend to point out. So this is why this is a great thing, because this actually is addressing that issue that we have with policing. And look, the issue that we have with, of course, a lot of African Americans being set back, being held back because of those charges being on the record. It's as if it's not already hard enough for an African American person to get a good job. And I go back to, of course, that one study where they would have resumes, the exact same resume with the exact thing written down, just with different names. One had a white-sounding name, the other had a black-sounding name. And guess who ended up getting callbacks? The white-sounding name. So there's already an institutional disadvantage baked into the cake for black people. Now, add in drug charges on their records, possession charges on their records, possible jail time, incarceration. Well, then you pretty much guarantee that an African-American person will never be able to advance in society. That's why it's great that they're doing this. Now, The Hill reports that Seattle is following the footsteps of Philadelphia District Attorney Larry Krasner. Krasner, who's a real progressive, right? He's a real progressive fighter, and he's doing exactly what he said he was going to do. Now, back in February, he dropped more than 50 criminal charges against residents for marijuana possession. He says that this shift was to free up police resources to actually go and do real police work instead of just targeting minorities or whoever for nonviolent drug offenses. That's like the easiest mark. Instead of doing their real job and solving hard crimes and putting themselves in danger, which, look, I'm not saying none of them do, but I'm saying that that's what they should be doing more of. Instead of going after possession and nonviolent offenses, somebody smoking a goddamn plant, they should actually do other police work and get the violent criminals off the streets, because that's what we want them to do. So now that's good that Seattle is following in those footsteps, because that's a huge, huge positive for everybody that's been impacted by the drug war. Now, it's also a great example of what happens when you elect a true progressive. And as I said, Krasner is the real deal. Now, look, I live in Michigan, and here we have a chance to elect another progressive DA. That's Dana Nessel. So she won her primary, which is fantastic. That happened a couple of weeks ago. And now she's going to go up against a Republican, and Michigan has a chance of getting its own progressive DA who's going to actually do the same types of things. So, Michigan, get out there. Voters, you've got a chance. Now, this is also what happens. Not only is Philadelphia saving money on no longer doing pointless prosecutions for non-violent offenses like possession, but they're also helping reduce incarceration rates. And for those who have this on their record, well, as I said before, having this crime on their record impacts their ability to get good jobs and live in certain areas. Now, these people will actually have a chance to finally move forward and not have simple possession charges follow them around and destroy their prospects for a decent life going forward. So this is excellent news. Thank goodness for Seattle for taking this step. This is very positive, and we need to continue moving forward on this issue until we have actual justice for everybody. Okay. All right. So that's it. That's all I got for you guys today. Hopefully you enjoyed the show. If you haven't already, please give us a like and share. Not only that, but I want to thank, of course, people who donated to the Super Chat. Thank you. Appreciate it. If you want to become a supporter of the show, go to patreon.com/TYTNation. That's how you can support us more long term. All right, everybody. Thank you. Love you guys. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow around the nation.